pilots, the ones who hold the fate of hundreds in their hands, high above the earth. One wrong decision is all it takes to turn the sky into a graveyard in seconds. But what you're about to hear isn't just a mistake. It's recklessness, deception, and madness beyond belief. From a female pilot descending into psychological breakdown, to a father letting his child take control of an aircraft mid-flight, to a co-pilot who turned a cockpit into a tomb for 150 innocent people. You think that's the limit of insanity? Not even close. One pilot even had sex in the cockpit during a flight training session. And the most chilling part, every single story is real. In today's video, you'll witness the most shocking events ever recorded inside a cockpit, all caused by the very people trusted to keep us safe. Buckle up. This ride is about to shake harder than any storm you've ever flown through. 1. Germanwings Flight 9525, 2015. A devastating tragedy when the co-pilot deliberately turned the plane into a mass grave. On March 24, 2015, Germanwings Flight 9525 took off from Barcelona, Spain to Düsseldorf, Germany, with 144 passengers and 6 crew members in the calm blue sky over Europe. No one knew they were stepping into a journey with no return. After the plane reached cruising altitude, the captain temporarily left the cockpit to use the restroom, a completely normal action on any long flight. But at that very moment, tragedy began to unfold silently. Andreas Lubitz, the 27-year-old co-pilot, locked the cockpit door from the inside. Just one button, one latch. And the entire Airbus A320 was now in the hands of a man with darkness in his mind. No alarm, no explanation, no warning. Lubitz quietly set the control system to descent mode, starting a gradual and deliberate descent over the next 8 minutes, while the plane slowly descended toward the Alps. Sounds from the cockpit grew suffocating. The captain pounded on the door, shouting to be let in. Passengers began to panic. Screams echoed from the cabin. Meanwhile, Lubitz sat still, breathing evenly, not saying a word. The cockpit became chillingly silent. The Airbus slammed into the mountainside at over 700 km/h, shattering into thousands of pieces. All 150 people on board were killed. No one survived. Why? Because Lubitz, as the investigation later revealed, suffered from severe depression and had harbored suicidal thoughts for years, but had hidden all his medical records from the airline. Worse, psychologists had previously advised him to permanently stop flying, but he continued working due to loopholes in the aviation medical system. This accident became one of the most painful and shocking aviation disasters of the 21st century, not due to technical error, not due to bad weather, but because one person in darkness dragged hundreds of others into death with him. Since then, all major airlines have changed cockpit security protocols, requiring at least 2 people to be in the cockpit at all times to prevent a similar tragedy. On Mount Livernet, a cold stone memorial was erected, engraved with the names of the 150 victims. No farewell, no coffins, only falling petals in the mountains, where humanity once again realized no tragedy hurts more than silence inside the cockpit. 2. Russian Flight School, when the cockpit turned into a bedroom mid-air. In May 2022, an unprecedented scandal shook not only Russia's aviation industry, but also sent shockwaves through international media. At the center of the story was a 28-year-old flight instructor, already married, and a 21-year-old female trainee who had just entered her first stage of flight practice. Initially, no one paid much attention to their relationship, but then, after what seemed like a routine training session on a Cessna 172, a small aircraft commonly used in pilot training, everything spiraled completely out of control, according to internal sources from Sassovo Civil Aviation School. The flight that day went according to plan. Takeoff in the early afternoon. Training flight over the designated area for about 40 minutes. Then, safe landing. All the official records were clean. But what wasn't in the report appeared online a few days later. A video nearly 6 minutes long, recorded by phone, spread rapidly across social media platforms. The content shocked everyone, an act of intimacy between the instructor and the trainee, right in the cockpit. While the plane was still flying at an altitude of over 1,000 meters. Even more disturbing, the video was filmed by the two of them as a private memento. No one knows why or how the clip was leaked, but within less than 24 hours of its appearance, it had already spread across all major social platforms in Russia. The Sassovo School Board immediately convened an emergency meeting. The result? Both individuals, the instructor and the trainee, received the highest level of disciplinary action, permanent expulsion. But the shock didn't stop there. The subsequent internal investigation showed that the relationship between the instructor and the female trainee was not simply a moment of impulsiveness. In a series of leaked messages, it was discovered that the instructor himself had initiated the promise of free flight practice in exchange for private sessions right on the plane. Some messages even clearly displayed boasting and a dismissive attitude toward professional ethics, indicating that this was not the first time he had abused his position. After the video was leaked, several former trainees also came forward to confirm that they had previously heard about cockpit rumors at the Sassovo school, but no one had concrete evidence. This incident became the last straw, collapsing the reputation of one of Russia's oldest flight training centers. Immediately, the Russian Ministry of Transport ordered a comprehensive inspection of all pilot training facilities nationwide. A senior aviation official publicly stated on television, "This is not just a violation of professional ethics. This is a direct challenge to flight safety at the most severe levels." As for the instructor, many sources reported that he had left the Ryazan area just a few days after the disciplinary decision. All his social media accounts were wiped clean. The female trainee also disappeared from all online platforms. No one knows where the two are now. Russian media called this the most serious scandal involving inappropriate relations in the history of civil aviation training. But what sent chills was not only the act that took place in the cockpit, but the assumption that followed. What if the plane that day had encountered an emergency, when both the pilot and trainee were busy doing something else? However, that was still not the worst situation ever to happen inside a cockpit, because there was once a flight where the person at the controls was not a pilot. 3. United Airlines, 2017, when the one in control lost it before the plane even moved. In February 2017, a United Airlines flight from Texas to San Francisco was delayed over 2 hours due to technical issues. Passengers were frustrated, but willing to wait, as long as they got to fly safely. But what terrified them that day didn't come from the engines. It came from a person. A female pilot boarded the plane, not in uniform, her hair disheveled, her gaze distant and unfocused. No one understood what was happening until she picked up the microphone and began to speak. At first, it was odd humor. "If anyone's bothered by how I look, give me 10 minutes. I'll go change." But then her tone turned unstable. She ranted about her divorce, insulted politicians, and suddenly began targeting a black couple sitting in the cabin. The atmosphere turned razor tight. Some passengers cried. Others shouted to be let off the plane. No one believed the woman in front of them was fit to fly. The crew acted quickly, announcing a change of pilot. The airline was forced to refund passengers who demanded to leave. Afterward, social media lit up with posts like, "She unraveled right before our eyes. If that plane had taken off, we might not be here to talk about it." No tragedy happened that day, but everyone on board understood one chilling truth. The greatest threat in the air isn't always the aircraft. It might be the mind behind the controls. And yet, that wasn't the most outrageous thing to ever happen in a cockpit, because halfway across the globe, high over Russian skies, a seemingly ordinary training flight turned into a scandal so shocking it embarrassed an entire industry. 4. Aeroflot 593, 1994. When an airliner became a child's plaything. On the night of March 22nd, 1994, Aeroflot Flight 593, an Airbus A310, departed from Moscow, bound for Hong Kong in perfect silence. Passengers were asleep. The skies were calm. It seemed like a flawless flight. But then, a small act, born from a father's love and pride, tore that peaceful night apart. Captain Yaroslav Kudrinsky, a seasoned pilot with thousands of flight hours, decided to invite his two children, a 15-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, into the cockpit to experience what it feels like to fly a plane. He thought it would be a memory they'd never forget, and it was. But it became the final memory for everyone on board that night. Not content with just observing, Kudrinsky allowed his son to sit in the captain's seat, place his hands on the control column, and try it out. He believed the autopilot would continue holding course, just like the old Soviet aircraft he was familiar with, but Airbus didn't work that way. When the boy unknowingly pushed the control column a bit too hard, the autopilot silently disengaged the heading hold mode, switching into manual control. Without issuing any audible warning, the aircraft began to roll, slowly at first, then more, and eventually, it banked nearly 90 degrees, nosediving straight toward the ground. It all happened too fast. By the time Captain Kudrinsky realized what was going on, the entire cabin had entered a state of zero gravity. Passengers had no idea, no screaming, no warning, just silence, drifting through the air, less than 5 minutes after the boy first touched the controls. The Airbus A310 slammed into the Siberian mountains at a speed of 750 km/h. All 75 people on board died instantly. No one survived, all because of a father's fleeting moment of pride, just because he said, "Let him try for a second." The released cockpit voice recording has sent chills around the world. In it, Kudrinsky's panicked voice can be heard shouting instructions to his son as the aircraft plunged fatally toward the Earth. The crash of Flight 593 became one of the most tragic and senseless disasters in modern aviation history. After that, most major airlines enforced a strict ban: no family members allowed in the cockpit under any circumstance, because no one wants to risk the lives of hundreds for a family moment. But sometimes, the threat doesn't come from the cockpit, it comes from the passengers, just after the wheels touch the ground. 5. The drunk passenger. When the pilot used force and the cockpit became a UFC ring, the flight to Charlotte seemed to be winding down peacefully, wheels on the runway, speed decreasing, passengers unbuckling their seatbelts, and then, from seat 14D, chaos erupted. A middle-aged man, reeking of alcohol, suddenly stood up and staggered toward the emergency exit. Flight attendants shouted for him to sit back down. He didn't. Instead, he shouted back, "I paid for this seat. I'm getting off. Now." The cabin froze. Some passengers shrank into their seats. Others grabbed their phones to record. The man kept pushing forward, swatting away the crew like flies. The plane was still taxiing. The cockpit door flew open. 2 pilots stepped out. No headsets, no gloves, just steely eyes and firm footsteps. The captain approached. Calmly, he said, "Take your seat, now." The response? A shove and a loud retort, "Who do you think you are?" In an instant, the captain's hat hit the floors, and in one swift motion, the unruly passenger was taken down, flat on his back, hands pinned behind him, face pressed to the carpet, one knee on the spine. The first officer secured his legs. No yelling, no chaos, just a clean, practiced takedown like they'd rehearsed it 100 times. When airport police boarded the plane, the man was still struggling, but it was useless. The captain looked up and said, "In the sky, I'm in charge, and I'm not letting anyone turn this plane into tomorrow's headline." Social media exploded. The video of the takedown went viral. Someone called him Captain America, Real Life Edition. Another posted, "Best flight of my life. Drama, action, and nobody died." In aviation, where rules rule everything, Sometimes a perfectly timed takedown is the only way to keep order in the air. But that same industry once watched a reckless amateur nearly crash a plane full of people just for a few likes on YouTube. 6. Chad Field, the amateur pilot who nearly died just to film a YouTube video. June 2023. Chad Field, an amateur American pilot, decided the sky would be his stage, and his small Cessna, the perfect prop to impress the influencer world. His goal? To dazzle the Michael family, social media stars with millions of followers, known for their once-in-a-lifetime experience vlogs. His plan? A scenic flight over the breathtaking Uinta Mountains of Utah. Aerial shots, laughter in the cockpit, cinematic slow-mos of nature, and an emotional closing scene in the wilderness. It sounded like a Netflix episode, but none of them realized they were minutes away from becoming the subject of a breaking news alert. The first mistake came before takeoff, obsessed with crafting the perfect flight. Chad overfilled the fuel tanks, loaded 6 adults, exceeding the aircraft's safe weight, and still chose to fly low and slow for better video angles. No weight check, no safety margin, just the chase for the perfect shot. On the return flight, right after crossing a vast lake, things fell apart. Warning alarms screamed. The familiar giggles faded, replaced by a suffocating silence. The cockpit wasn't a set anymore. It was a waiting room for disaster. In a rare moment of clarity, Chad retracted the landing gear to cut drag and fought to keep the plane airborne. With a risky, last-second maneuver, the overloaded Cessna crash-landed on a grassy strip by the lake, skidding dozens of meters before finally stopping. Everyone survived, but no one walked away unscathed. 2 were seriously injured. The Michael family was traumatized, and the entire crash, every scream, every tilt, was captured on camera like a blockbuster gone wrong. Days later, Chad went live on social media. He called it an unfortunate mishap and said, "We're all fine." Experts didn't agree. A former military pilot told National News he turned a vlog shoot into a gamble with human lives. That wasn't an accident. That was stupidity, filmed from multiple angles. Online reactions exploded. Some condemned Chad. Others searched for the video, eager to watch the near-death experience. Views soared, but beneath the noise lay a bitter truth. When a pilot flies for likes, viewers might be entertained, but passengers may never walk away. And so, Chad Field's flight became a warning for a generation where clout trumps caution. But not all pilots fly for fame, because sometimes the greatest aviation miracles come from those who never live stream, never seek praise, but simply do the right thing. 30,000 feet above the earth. 7. Saren Erexel, becoming a midwife in the sky, delivering a baby in the airplane toilet at an altitude of 10,000 meters on a Vietjet flight from Taipei to Bangkok. As the aircraft was gliding smoothly through thick white clouds at over 10,000 meters high, a piercing sound rang out from the passenger cabin. The agonizing scream of a pregnant young woman. No one had time to understand what was happening when a flight attendant rushed toward the cockpit, lowering her voice urgently. "She's in labor. It's happening now." Captain Saren Erexel, a veteran pilot with nearly 2 decades of experience, didn't hesitate for a second. He immediately handed over control to the co-pilot, unbuckled his seatbelt, and sprinted straight to the back of the cabin. The scene that unfolded left every passenger stunned. The captain, usually only heard through the announcement speaker, was now crouched down on the floor, working with the crew to turn a toilet cubicle barely 1 meter wide into an emergency delivery room in the sky. Miraculously, 2 passengers on board were nurses. They quickly joined him in preparing everything needed: clean water, gloves, towels. Every medical item they could find in the cabin was urgently gathered. Some passengers joined in. One held the partition. Another warmed water. Others handed over supplies. Just 20 minutes later, amid the clouds, with the engines roaring, a newborn's cry echoed through the sky. A healthy baby boy was born right inside the aircraft, above the skies of Asia, at an altitude of 200 meters, nearly 34,000 feet from the ground, without an operating room, without a doctor, only courage and a heart that refused to give up. Not long after, the loudspeaker echoed, "We would like to announce our flight has just welcomed a new little passenger. A baby boy was safely born in the sky. Congratulations." The entire cabin erupted in applause as soon as the plane landed safely in Bangkok. The image of Saren Rexel holding the baby wrapped in a soft Vietjet blanket spread rapidly across social media. The flight crew gave the baby a friendly nickname, Baby Sky, a short and simple name. Yet it carries a story that can be told for a lifetime. After that event, Saren, who had flown hundreds of thousands of nautical miles, faced storms, technical alerts, sudden pressure drops, said, "This is the first time in my life my hands trembled, not because of turbulence, but because I knew what I was holding wasn't a control stick, but a newborn life." The press called him the midwife at the highest altitude in the world. The online community called him Captain Dad, though he wore a captain's rank. Saren Rexel made his mark in aviation history not through expert piloting, but by the heart and instinct of a human being above the clouds. But not everyone in the cockpit carries a kind heart. There was once a co-pilot who silently locked the door and guided the aircraft straight into a mountain, taking 150 lives into death. These were moments of suffocating tension, of madness, of pain, and at times, of miracles that happened behind the cockpit door where passengers never get to see. From deadly negligence, foolish decisions to extraordinary courage, each story reminds us that the sky is not always calm, and those at the controls are still human, with feelings, with flaws, and sometimes with darkness hidden deep within. If what you've just heard made you think, please click like to support the production team. Don't forget to share the video so more people can discover the hidden corners of the aviation world that few dare to talk about. And make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next shocking stories waiting ahead. We'll return with truths no one else dares to reveal.